Welcome, and over the next few minutes I'm going to tell you something of the wonderful natural resource that's known as Kings Bay in Crystal River. Crystal River's on the Gulf Coast in the Nature Coast area of Florida. Quite rightly, it's known as the gem of Florida's Nature Coast. In this satellite view, you can see how Kings Bay itself flows into the Crystal River and hence down to the Gulf of Mexico. Whilst the bay does have housing and canal development around it, mostly built in the 1970s, the new laws on wetland protection mean that no further housing can be built. Let's start our tour on the south side of the bay, which I think is probably the most beautiful part of the bay. The bay is largely surrounded by sawgrass, and in the centre of the bay there are sawgrass islands. The bay is freshwater. It's fed by water from the Florida aquifer through a variety of springs, about 30 in total, that produce 7,300 gallons per second, or over 630 million gallons per day of fresh water. Whilst there has been some saltwater intrusion from the Gulf, basically the bay is largely fresh water. Because the bay is connected to the Gulf of Mexico by the Crystal River, which is only 6 miles long, it allows dolphins to come into the bay to hunt fish. This was actually one in the canal next to our house. The dolphins don't live permanently in the bay because they need to go out into salt water every so often to clean their skin. Dolphins hunt by corralling the fish into enclosed areas and using their tails to stun the fish so that they can eat them more readily. This is one displaying that action off our sea wall. In the bay, the dolphins tend to hunt in pods. They drive the fish into enclosed areas and surround the fish, and then one by one they go in and feed. It's a fabulous sight to see the dolphins surrounding the fish and the fish jumping to try and escape them. Here's another view of a podded dolphin surrounding a whole bunch of fish, driving them and compressing them. Fantastic. Continuing our view of Kings Bay, you can see there is of course housing development around, but because of very tight zoning laws, the houses are no more than 4 stories, and in most cases are just 2-story buildings. These are some of the sawgrass islands in the middle of the bay. There are 9 islands in the bay, a total area of 43 acres, and they form the Crystal River National Wildlife Refuge and are protected by the US Fish and Wildlife Service. Of course, it's not just the dolphins that hunt for fish in the bay. Many variety of bird life are present. Ospreys are always around, and here's a pelican about to dive. And again. Many other types of birds. Ducks, coots make their home here, at least for part of the year. The sawgrass islands and the canals around the bay make a perfect habitat for wading birds. And here's an egret looking for food. This one's a pal of mine. Dreadful to think that these beautiful birds were once hunted almost to extinction for the sake of their feathers. Another ever-present are the blue heron, as made famous by James A. Michener in his book Chesapeake. heron and the egret seem to compete for territory. The blue herons, being larger, always seem to dominate. Of course, there are plenty of other birds present. Cardinal birds are normally around, and you can hear the splashing of the kingfisher diving for fish. Hummingbirds come normally to any plant that's red. The bottle brushes attract them. Woodpeckers can often be heard. This one decided to attack the tree outside our Florida room. Back to Kings Bay, and this is the east side of the bay now, the side closest to the main shopping areas. And here you can find some of the largest properties, and the most expensive, of course, waterfront properties in Citrus County. The house we're coming to now was in fact the first $1 million house ever sold in Crystal River, and that was a lot of years ago. Further on we come past this undeveloped and protected area to the waterway which leads to Three Sisters Spring. And the world famous Three Sisters Spring is in fact up that waterway underneath the bridge. Many famous wildlife photographers have filmed here, including Jacques Cousteau. And of course the reason is the presence of manatee. You'll nearly always find manatee around Three Sisters Spring, and that's the reason why it's such a magnet for people who either want to film or have an encounter with manatee. The land around Three Sisters Spring has always been privately owned, but there is a move now to bring it into public ownership. A whole variety of state agencies contributing money to preserve this area for posterity. Crystal River is the only place in the United States where one can legally swim with manatee, and therefore the only place where you can get this kind of encounter. And of course the crystal clear water in the Three Sisters Spring allows filming in a way that is difficult in other parts of the bay. There are very strict rules which govern these kind of encounters with manatee, to protect the animals and to stop them being harassed. But I think it would be a shame if we lost the ability to be able to commune with them in this kind of way. Now we're approaching the northern end of the bay, which is the most commercial part. This is Pete's Pier, which has boat storage and public boat ramp. And in the bay, beyond Pete's Pier, there are two seafood restaurants where you can dock your boat and go and eat. We're coming round now past the housing development to the river, which stretches down to the Gulf of Mexico, and that in fact is the river in the distance. Just past Pete's Pier there's an island which has a house on it, and the only way they can get from there is by water. And that house always has seabirds of all kinds on it. Those hire boats, as you can see, are on their way to the restaurant, probably for lunch. I hope I've given you a taste of Kings Bay so you can understand better why we love it so much. Perhaps one day you'll have a chance to share it with us.